Hi, my name is Anna. So I'm going to talk to you guys about the tampon tax. If you guys are well aware about it, I'm going to discuss why I think it should be abolished in the U.S. So first, the tampon tax refers to as a condition and sales tax law under which tampons and other feminine hygiene products used to absorb menstrual flow are not taxes that exempt like other medical necessities. So I'm going to discuss the tax on tampons is discriminatory towards women. Tampons and pads are a medical device, and tax on tampons negatively affects lower class. So first, I'm going to discuss how tax on tampons is discriminatory towards women because it creates female body shame. So a researcher at Sustainable Sanitation and Water Management, Stephanie Kaiser, discusses how it associates with evil spirits, shame, and embarrassment surrounding sexual reproduction. So I would like to say that personally, I think that menstruating and men and women both often find it very embarrassing. And so if you're to happen to have an accident, in the workplace, it's kind of embarrassing to walk out, and it creates kind of body shame because you shouldn't be affected by that. It should be equal between both men and women if any type of accident happens. So Hannah Rose Ewens and Amy Newman are journalists, and they speak about how the government capitalizes on period shame and how it's not fair because of the gender inequality based off of that. There are not taxes on condoms and Viagra pills, but there are on pads and tampons. And an example of how gender inequality kind of affects us as college students is a study done by Sarah Pavick. And she says the reactions of male and female college students were measured in response to a woman dropping one of two feminine items, either a tampon or a hair clip from her bag. Researchers found the woman who dropped the tampon was perceived by both men and women as less competent and less likable than the woman who dropped the less offensive hair clip. So I would like to also state that from the Washington Post, Sarah Larimer also discusses how you can't just ignore a period. It's not like you can just ignore the constant flow. It's a natural bodily function. So the next claim I would like to talk about is tampons and pads should be considered a medical device. It's an involuntary biological function. The FDA states that intended to affect the structure or any function of the body or man or other animals, and which does not achieve any of its primary intended purposes through chemical action within or on the body of man or other animals, and which is not dependent upon being metabolized for the achievement of any of its primary intended purposes. Andrea Donsky kind of further reiterates that menstrual tampons and sanitary pads are considered a medical device because they're intended to affect the function of the body, which the FDA has the 510K requirements because of that. So we have two politicians who actually talk on USA Today about the tampon tax being considered a double standard, with some states taxing tampons while offering tax exemptions for medical goods. I believe that states that we're kind of at an impasse of how each state should handle this situation, when our previous president actually always stated that it should have to be discussed between each state, because we can't globally state that the U.S. should just exempt it. So Stephanie Kaiser also states again that it creates a risk for infection. And I think that's important to realize that the risk of infection, because some women cannot afford to pay for the extra tax on these tampons or pads, can get bacteria to travel back to the uterus. And these unclean rags that people will use in place of that will kind of affect women in the workplace. And so common knowledge is that when pregnant women go into the hospital and they tend to have children, they end up menstruating afterwards. And they're provided menstrual pads that are not taxed because they're considered a medical device. But whether when they're going home, they're still bleeding, and they still have to provide themselves with tampons or pads to supplement what they're not getting from the hospital. And I also want to explain about how it affects lower class. So low-income women cannot afford tampons, and Hannah Rose Ewens, a journalist, and Christina Tarucci also talk about why tampons aren't cheaper for those who can't afford them. They're the same price for everyone. Increasing that price only means that women who are worse off are losing out the most. And they talk about how we tend to spend more on necessities as a whole entire group and poor. So it's kind of important for us to realize that not everybody has access to them. And it also affects teachers. Females, they don't have the proper facilities to get these products, and they don't have the privacy that they need to deal with these issues. And so I want to also talk about how our president, Donald Trump, was also talking about Megyn Kelly had blood coming out of her eyes, blood coming out of her wherever. The tax issue was debated in British Parliament. Tory Bill Cash wouldn't even utter the word tampon until ceremoniously called out by Labour MP Stella Creasy. And that's important because even our government is pointing out that women are being degraded and humiliated and exposed on national television or in public, and it's not okay. And I think that's kind of why we should abolish the tax on tampons. That's it.
Okay, well, let's start with a couple of the strengths here. I thought that you did a good job citing the sources for all of your information and trying to give qualifications for the people that you're quoting. You're pretty consistent about that. There were several pieces of expert testimony that you cited. There are a couple of pieces of factual data that you illustrate. There's a reference at one point to some medical criteria that I think it was the FDA has created, although I don't think that that was explained very clearly, and so that should be a little bit sharper, but that would be a piece of factual data that I think adds to the point you're making. There's a good preview of what the supporting structure of the speech is going to be, and in the body of the speech you do a pretty reasonable job identifying the supporting points as you get through them. Some of the things that I think are a little bit problematic, there's a lot of presuppositions built into some of these arguments that I think need some additional background. There's some conclusionary information about how people are perceiving this issue that is based on the language that's being used. There's this kind of analysis that's being presented. It's almost a rhetorical analysis of the language that's being used that suggests that this is significant and important when I'm not sure that there's any way that you can measure that. There's an assumption, a claim on the last point about pricing, and you talk about how it's an issue of affordability in different parts of the world, but we don't get any data on different parts of the world. We don't know how much the tax is. You mentioned state to state, and at one point I thought, okay, well, that sounds like it's talking about in the United States, but then you're also talking about Great Britain, and you mentioned around the world. I'm going, okay, so is this an international issue that we're talking about? It's not quite clear to me, so I thought that was a little bit problematic. There's no, like I said, there's no data that says any woman has been denied access to these products because of the tax that's put on them, and that's a key assumption of that third point. And I just don't have any data that says that. I just have the inference that's being made. Well, if you've increased the price, that's that increases or it puts people further out of the option. Well, it depends on how much the tax is. And like I said, there's not any information on that. So I think that that's a little bit problematic. The one thing that I think is the biggest problem from the very beginning of the speech is that you've got a claim of policy that you're arguing here. And although I think the secondary points mostly try to keep it to issues of fact, the way you've presented it is that this is all justification for abolishing these taxes. And I think that that's really not what the purpose of the assignment is. So there's a little bit of a problem there. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you.